Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about testers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, is there such a thing as a 10x tester? And what happens if a 10x software developer and a 10x tester work together? Well, I assume that like the new incarnation of Chuck Norris is born. Uh, but yeah, there is such a thing as a 10x. Well, I would say is there's something as a 10x everything, because my definition of a 10xer is basically an individual who is so talented at what they do that they raise the quality of practically the entire company. I've said so in other videos that this people call the 10x person like a theoretical person, or like it is a hypothetical person, and I like to say that it becomes a question of definition. If you take someone like I don't know, the famous people of the world like Leonardo da Vinci or Nikola Tesla, like these historic names, I would make the argument that these are people who are 10x of whatever they were doing. I don't think that there is such a thing as a 10x developer who just writes code faster than somebody else, but there are definitely people who are so good at what they do that they can make the difference to a point where they raise an entire company or raise the entire society to a whole new level. That's, in my opinion, a 10xer. And just as there are 10x developers, there are 10x testers. I've never met it depends a little bit on the tester. I've never I mean, there are absolutely people who are very gifted in testing in terms of like being able to test all the cases and finding all the bugs and so forth, which is a very useful thing. But I would argue that even that in of itself becomes sort of there's a very finite amount of value that you can gain from that. My personal opinion on testing is that if you have a tester who does not possess coding skills, or don't know how to help out with automation and setting up work frameworks, then you have a very limited person, because testing in of itself, like the basics of testing, like manual testing, basically anybody could do that. And the reality is that it's not a very effective way it's almost impossible, I would say, to scale that. But what is very scalable is if you have people like actual QA engineers or actual engineers who know how to write software to help out with that sort of stuff. And in my opinion, which sort of is the tragic of it all, the best tester in a test QA engineer is again going to be a software engineer, because the act of raising, testing quality and so forth is still it's an engineer's job, if that makes sense. I've worked with a lot of testers and QA engineers, and the best ones, as I've said, are basically able to write code practically I'm not saying at the same level as a software developer, but almost, because it's the false notion a lot of people have when it comes to software software is that there is a difference. There is not. There is no difference between a software developer's skill set and a QA's skill set. There is literally none, because the reality is that the knowledge that a QA needs in order to do their job is I would say it's a skill set that is on par with having a software developer learning a specific work framework or a specific set of tools, and that is like daily stuff for the average software developer. You can imagine it as being about as big as a challenge for a software developer to learn that as going and learning a new web framework or something like that. It's just a suite of tools, and then everything else comes down to the person's ingenuity and understanding of the work process. And when you have an engineer or like a tester who is at that level, or someone who really understands how to do this sort of work, they usually are able to provide solutions that are very, very good. like in terms of like they will raise the overall quality of the work that is being produced, definitely by 10x. And the ways that it's usually done is that they understand where the software developers usually are lacking in, okay, where they are going to be, when they're going to be lazy, when there's risk factors, what they need in order to very quickly reduce, like resolve a production issue or a bug or something like that, and the tools that they need, and the telemetry types of like logging and so forth and so forth. All these sorts of factors that make up how quickly you go from a broken state to a fixed state. That sort of area it's a pretty big area. It's actually it goes from being the least important thing to being the most important thing usually, if you scale your company. And that's where, like, if you have the right tester in that scenario, they will definitely be a 10xer. You will never be able to do that with someone who just does manual testing. They will never be able to help out the team to that degree. And so if you have a 10x developer and a 10x tester, well, one way you could look at it is, of course, I mean, if you have 10xers on both sides, then they basically do, like I've found that they usually have a very good back and forth, and they're usually, to me, it's sort of like asking what happens if you have the world's best football team versus the world's worst one. I mean, they're still playing football, it's just that they do it at very different levels, if that makes sense. And to me, it's the same thing. I mean, technically, if you have a 10x developer, you don't need, well, apart from time restrictions, because that's the thing, right? If you have a 10xer, you can still not get that person to work so fast that they outwork 2 or 3 people at the same time. It's usually about what are they working on, like what solutions are they going to provide. So to me, having a 10x developer together with a 10x tester, it's like just having 2 10x people that can, like, the developer can focus on development tasks and the tester can focus on testing tasks. You're going to get more in a short amount of time. But you could have just as well as had just the 10x developer, because the 10x developer by definition is going to be a person who's capable of doing all the things that the tester is able to do as well. If we define it as the most valuable thing that you can do is to invest in test automation and tooling for scaling a testing process, that's at least how I look at it. So what I want you to take away from this is that, well, of course, I would say that there's a 10x for everything, guys. You can find a 10x baker, a 10x composer, a 10x police officer. Like, there's a 10x of everything. There are people who are very, very gifted at what they do. They're extremely good. And there's no exception when it comes to QAs and testers and so forth. And like a 10x tester or someone who's very, very good at their job is usually an individual who truly understands the work process of software developers. Because the thing that makes the difference usually when you talk about quality in software development, if we just talk about bugs and technical matters, is that you truly have to understand the weak points. Where are the mistakes usually introduced into the coding process, and what do you need to provide? One part to reduce those problems as much as possible before they go into production, and once they are out in production, how do you get to a resolved state as quickly as possible? All of that entire process, in a sense, I would go as far as to say that they're true. You know that you are getting to be in the same sphere of a 10x tester as my definition, when you are a tester or a QA engineer who understands the entire delivery process, the entire CI/CD process, and understand all the steps that takes place and where the problem areas are usually when you're delivering software as a software team. And if you have a 10x developer together with a 10x tester, you might as well just have, well, you mean it's going to be the same as just having the 10x developer. It's just that you have one more person who's going to be able to offload some of the work from the 10x developer. If you could like make a measurement of that, I don't think that you can truly do that, because it's sort of like saying that, you know, Einstein and Isaac Newton could have been doing the same sort of work, right? People who are very gifted are usually not just replaceable. They're usually uniquely gifted in the thing that they are good at. So having as many 10xers as possible is actually just a good thing, because one 10xer might be able to think about solutions to problems in one area, whereas another one is going to be very good at another area. But if in a theory thing would have been, well, if you have two 10xers, you're basically just going to be able to produce faster. But at the very least, we could say that if you only have the 10x developer, that would be the best thing, because the solutions to the testing problem is usually an engineering problem. It is something that requires a clever person, and I mean, the best testers are engineers, like real engineers who understand how to write software and so forth and so forth. That's at least how I look at it. Have a great day.